Hello, I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Inspired, and the people who inspire me. Well, today we'll be talking to a treasure, Allyson Taylor. I guess from fame to fortune, she's come a long way, and we go way back. But she started her own design company after getting a job designing sound stages at A&M Records on La Brea, and then designed homes for Herb Alpert, et cetera, et cetera. She grew up in a design community. Her mother was a designer, and she is a walking image. And before I introduce you, Allyson, I want you to just, if you can, because I know it's not video, but if you can just talk a little bit about your ensemble, because it's so beautifully put together. It's like a painting.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm wearing a large amber oversized necklace that I found at the Discovery Store, Toluca Lake. I'm wearing a vintage Dries Van Noten, Belgian designer, blazer that I got off of eBay. I'm actually wearing a mesh top that's from the Gautier collection from Target probably about 30 years ago.
Wow.
And a kilt skirt by Off-White done by, I just forgot the name of the designer who passed away recently, who was so talented and wonderful. And as I was telling Joe earlier, the only things that I don't have on that are vintage are my boots and my underwear.
Now, what about your earrings?
Oh, the earrings are vintage, probably 1950s, frosted blue glass, kind of an ice blue.
Spectacular.
And even my purse, which is here, is a vintage Tod's from the 1990s.
Well, you are famous for trash to treasures. And I remember when I was doing Rooms for Improvement, you did a segment on that show, and it always amazed me. And we all, our family, have a piece of your trash to treasures in our homes, as you know. And, it's just so interesting that top designers use things that are not worth that much money. I can remember Albert Hadley, a very famous interior designer who was also a friend of mine. He would take the old Gallo bottles and have them made into lamps. And they were probably sitting on two gorgeous Biedermeier chests, but that were worth a fortune. But I love that idea of mixing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, because things have history and they have stories to tell, and just because they've become out of fashion or out of use or they have no describable use, like an old can, you find that's rusted in the desert, you can take something like that and make it an object of beauty and mix it with something like Albert Hadley did with the Biedermeier or Louis XV or a Joe d'Urso table on wheels, and put that piece of rusted trash that may have been used on an oxen's neck and put that on the table, and that becomes a piece. And it's a work of art because everything that was designed for use was designed by a designer.
Right.
So everything, therefore, has beauty in itself. So it's just learning to take the discards and show their true beauty and have them add to the beauty of what's current now.
I can remember Albert taking a coconut with the husk on it and spraying it gold.
How beautiful.
And it just placed on a table. It was spectacular. And of course, Sister Parrish, the famous designer, also believed in mixing and matching. And I just think, but you're selling yourself short because it takes the eye. And not everyone has that to bring colors, patterns, antiques. But tell us about some of the funny stories. You would pick things up on the sidewalks and...
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say, I'm actually glad that everybody doesn't have an eye, because then there wouldn't be anything left for us to find.
That's right.
And you know what? It gives us an opportunity to share our eye with people that appreciate our eye. So it becomes symbiotic in a way. I'd say, I make a joke about the fact that I still drive an SUV and my kids are in their 30s. I don't drive it to do carpool anymore. I drive it so that when I'm driving down the street or an alley, if I see an old discarded chair or chest, even with a rotator cuff injury, I will pick that thing up and put it in my car. And I have a garage filled with projects, but sooner or later I end up going into the project room and going and pulling something out that I forgot about or didn't use anymore, putting it in another place in my house, taking something else out, selling it, or donating it so that I can pay it forward to somebody like me going into a thrift shop, finding something beautiful.
Right.
And I'm looking for that stuff because today there's so many things manufactured in plastic. It's almost hard to appreciate it. But I did find at a swap meet a bleach bottle from Cuba that was decorated as a Madonna.
Wow.
They used the curve as her arm and the top as her head, and they put on a beautiful piece of doily around her neck as if it was lace. And they took something, just now we consider ugly and made it beautiful.
Right.
But in its being spray painted white after Albert Hadley and the Coconut, it became a work of art.
Well, when we were first married, and God bless my wife, she's always been very supportive of my craziness. I can remember being at our beach house and finding this wonderful French chair, fauteuil, I guess it was, on the sidewalk. And it was, torn up, and it was really pretty disgusting. I brought it to my upholsterer and had it reupholstered with Brunswick and Fee, wonderful fabric, which I got at a discount store. That chair served us for years and years. Now, we've been married 56 years, but I would say maybe 40 years. It traveled with us all over the place, from the east to the west, and never, people always used to compliment. We had a gentleman who came through our house once and said, "Oh, those are very, very expensive John Robson Gibbons or whatever chairs. I bought them in IKEA for my son." I had them reupholstered, but it's the way you mix it, and you have that talent.
Thank you. It's really fun because I can appreciate contemporary art, and I look at some of these books and where there's a coffee table and there's a lemon on it, and that's it. And I think John Saladino said, less is more, but less is a bore. And I kind of follow in the Saladino school of thought because I don't know, as discretionary as I am in what I take into my home, the desire to continue to find these things has not waned, so therefore it's created kind of a conundrum of, am I a hoarder? Do I have too much stuff on the coffee table? But learning how to edit it, and to me, that's the art. My favorite thing now to do are the vignettes. Is taking something old, something from IKEA, something you may have got at a swap meet, something your grandmother gave you that you thought you'd never take out of that closet, and your kids said they don't want when you die, and say, what, it's sad to leave it in that little cupboard there. It has history to tell. Let me take it out. I'll mix it along with the lemon and the book on Tom Ford, and that's going to be my coffee table. And it's the same thing. I found an old can from All detergent that they probably used as a mop, bucket. And it's blue and yellow, and it's rusted. I love rust. Everything's getting rusty, including myself, which is kind of freaky. But I filled it. I just went to Trader Joe's and bought some mulch and just filled it with white orchids from, Trader Joe's.
Right.
And I put that on the dining room table, and my husband walked in and he goes, "Why do you have a mop bucket on the dining room table?" I go, "Because it's beautiful."
Right, exactly. Well, I think through the artist's eye, and I just, I'm amazed at my age, the designers that I've worked with, architects that I've worked with. Of course, I traveled all over the world with my daughter for HGTV, and it just goes back to the same old thing. It's the eye, what the eye sees, and it's the window to the soul. And that's why I respect your vision. And I remember it way, way back. You haven't changed a bit at all. But when you would when you had the shop, you had a lot of pieces that you would then reinvent, I guess.
It's true. I had 2 slipper chairs that I'd found in an alley in Beverly Hills. Okay, and I remember trying, the art of how to place 2 chairs in a small SUV trunk. And that time I had the kids, so I couldn't put the big seats down. I became really adept at figuring out the spatial placement of those chairs. I redid them in a multi-strike fabric that I got from Diamond Foam.
Oh, gosh.
And
yes.
I had them in the window, and I think we sold them about 2 weeks later. And a woman walked in about 6 months later and said to me, "Where are those chairs that you had?" And these are the chairs I got out of the garbage. And she said, "I just bought a $1.6 million house in Encino," and this was 20 years ago, so that was like a big deal.
Right.
"And I want those chairs for my living room." And I said, "Well, I sold them." She said, "How could you sell them?" I said, "Well, that's kind of what I'm in business to do. But if you want those chairs, I can reproduce those chairs for you." It took a lot of taking for Diamond Foam to find that stripe again. Thank God they found like 12 yards. And I got a job from these chairs. But it's so funny that these trash can chairs led to my getting this job at this house in Encino. So it was it's learning to spot the beauty. It's almost the same quality you want to use with people, is looking at people, and though they may, you never can really judge who they are, because there was a story that happened at J. Robert Scott when I first started decorating, and if you don't mind, I'd love to tell you this story. And there was a woman who was Loretta Young's mother, and a lot of people won't.
Belzer.
Yeah, Gladys Belzer.
Right.
So Gladys Belzer was going up there were 6 stairs to get to the next level of J. Robert Scott, which was a showroom on Robertson very popular during the 90s. Mm-hmm. And she had 2 bags, I think one was a Brunswick bag, and she had fallen down. As she came down the steps, she tripped. And Sally, whose last name I won't say, in deference to the story, first ran out of her office and said, my Ming vases, no. Because there were 2 Ming vases on each side. And yet, you look at somebody as legendary as Gladys Belzer and the Ming vases, and to me, they both were equally as beautiful. I mean, she was running around at probably 90 years old with a pair of tennis shoes on. And 2 bags of samples in, her hands.
She did the homes of who's who.
Yeah.
In those days. Well, I've just finished an article for a trade magazine on scaling back. And,
I need to read it.
I've done it twice. But, people say, well, sell it off, get someone to come in and do. But I wanted to place the pieces that we had to give away with people who I really know that they'll take care of them. I wasn't interested in a get-rich-quick scheme or anything. And it's so important because you put a lot into your furniture, of many of the pieces I've designed, and you want to make sure, it's almost like taking an orphan. You want to make sure they have a good home. And I've always felt that way.
Well, I totally agree. Much to my husband's detriment, I feel the same way about clothing and being able to go to the thrift stores or to the, inexpensive upscale stores and finding these absolute treasures that become someone's discard. And for me as well, when I want to let it go, it will go to somebody that I know will appreciate it and understand. It may not be an expensive thing, but it's a beautiful thing.
Well, what's your advice for recycling? I mean, really, in this day and age where we're talking about reuse and, hanging on to what you have.
Well, I think it's really important. I don't also want to get to the point of recycling to the point that we don't have room for young, aspiring designers to come out and manufacture new things. I don't want to put an end to the development of new, because I think new works with the old. And I think what we have to do is take a look at everything and learn to appreciate it. If we don't, like you, think of somebody else that would love it, pass it on. I found that with a lot of things I had left over from the store, I had a lot of copper lusterware, vases, and things that were no longer fashionable, kind of that shabby chic kind of thing. And I couldn't throw them away, though, and I just couldn't give them to the thrift store, even though at that I wasn't as generous then as I am now, because I felt that someday I will find a use for it, that constant little voice in your head that says, I know I'm going to find a place for it. Mm-hmm. I know I'm going to be able to use it. How am I going to explain to my husband I'm bringing another thing into the house? But then I could go to somebody's house for dinner, and I will just go in my yard and pick some lavender
Absolutely.
and some rosemary and, stick it in that vase and put a little ribbon on the handle
Absolutely.
and give it to them as a house gift. And I know they will love it. I pick it with feeling. So I think that's important. The same thing with clothing and everything. There's no reason. I don't want to put young designers out of business, but, you could do wonderful things, upcycling and restoring. And again, I think it'll be important to maybe not this generation, but to their children to have something that's from the past, because that's kind of where we were. We skipped a generation of stuff.
Well, I think, too, gifts from the garden, very, very important. And we were very fortunate because the previous owners of the place that we're in now, she loved her garden. And unfortunately, she's not well. And I said to the daughter, bring her over, let her see that we've taken care of it and how beautiful it is. And she said, I just can't because it'll be too emotional for her. But the gift that she gave us is growing. And every year when the camellias come out and the lavender and the rosemary and even citrus, she has miniature citrus trees, it gives us such joy.
Yeah, I agree. I was lucky enough when I moved into my house 35 years ago to plant 2 Meyer lemons, because that was probably about the first time I ever tasted a Meyer lemon.
Delicious.
And now I call them pregnant. I mean, they're constantly giving back so much fruit. I bring bags to the ladies and the dry cleaners who love the lemons. Go to people's houses. You want some lemons? You want some lemons?
Absolutely.
And I'll just keep 6 or 7 in my car. And if I go somewhere and I just like the way the person acted to me, I'll go back to the car and say, here's some fresh lemons for you.
No, I think that's wonderful. Now, I would like to get your advice for our listeners because, and I always say I'm not being sexist, but for the women who are trying to develop their careers, and you paid your dues. You started in the sample room at Brunswick. You've worked for Janice, who's one of the, I think, most talented women in this business. She's been very good to me as well. And she, too, believes in educating the students. She taught a class at UCLA Extension. I don't know if you know that. Yes. But what would be your advice to someone who's trying to start out in the design business?
Well, I always had a term called cheap and chic, kind of like trash or treasures. Mm-hmm. And I think if you really feel that you want to start out, you can even start out by, today with Instagram, it's a great opportunity for you to do little things in your house, little vignettes. You don't have to go out and buy a lot of furniture. Go into your garage, take some stuff, spray paint it, put some weeds in it or lavender from your garden. Start photographing. Start publishing the things that you do. I would say never give up, because we come from a background that I don't, that is really storied in its importance, Joe. I mean, Michael Taylor and Caliph Alaton and Billy Baldwin. Billy Baldwin now is getting new recognition because of the Swan room that he did for the Paleys, all done with Indian fabric, like the stuff we used to get at Pier 1.
Right, that's
that Indian handprint.
Absolutely.
So is never give up. And you because you've witnessed so many changes starting from mid-century to the 60s to the 70s, the 80s kind of, and it's all back in some way. So, show people your talents, how you do assemblage, and offer to a friend to do a room for free, or go to a hotel and say, if you're having a luncheon, maybe I can, work with the bride and maybe collaborate with her on setting tables. I mean, I did all of that stuff. I was just kind of ballsy and, nudged my way in. And I had a legacy that was hard to follow because my mom was a very successful interior designer. And, of course, I didn't want to go into doing that because that would be too much like my mother.
Right.
So it ended up
fought it.
that I became my mother.
Exactly. Well, you had good teaching.
Right. But I think that a lot of people have so much access to taking things, again, that come from trash, that aren't expensive, and turning them into treasures, showing people that. And look what happened with Magnolia Home. Look what happened with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really was the hallmark of your careers, being able to see something that was mundane and turning it into something of beauty.
Well, the thing that was interesting is that HGTV has been wonderful, but I think you really touched something, and that's the social networks. When you mentioned Instagram, and there's been a lot of criticism, and there's a lot of bad things that are going on, there. And that's what we have to put up with when we're in this wonderful country club. But the social networks, it's free marketing. And if you're posting beautiful things or beautiful images, it makes people feel very, very good. And I cannot tell you how many times people have said to me, thank you for posting that, because it was a beautiful image. So you are a photographer as well?
I've become a good photographer using my Google camera.
Right.
And it gives a lot of opportunity for a novice who's not, who never grew up really using a 35 millimeter, on how to make, how to shoot your shot. And I think that if you want to start out in design, I even sometimes will photograph the fabrics that I'm putting together to wear, because it just...
This is a perfect example. As a matter of fact, I might take a picture of it.
Okay, because it's kind of the way you make a presentation to your client, where you're laying down samples. You throw these samples, you throw them on a table, and you kind of explain to them, the story of what you see. And I think it's a very good way to start out. Starting in the sample room was an advantage, because I got to touch and feel and see every textile and learn what they were.
And fine textiles, too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And again, that's something where we can recycle, but I don't want the mills to go out of business, because I noticed that even in clothing, everything's being manufactured out of synthetics. Okay, I get it. But I think that it's real important that we retain the art of good textiles, beautiful silks, beautiful brocades, beautiful velvets. They all have a use. I think mixing a modern white sterile room with a brocade from Scalamandre and beautiful tassels and I think, was it Pierre Frey?
Right.
Right, GIMP would be absolutely gorgeous in a totally modern room. But you can do that as well, finding a chair in the alley, taking it, or the beach,
right,
and finding a fabric, even at Joann's or wherever you go. If you need to wash it 50 times, throw a little bleach in there, make it look it's been around the block a few times, get some thumbtacks, and make yourself a gorgeous object. Photograph that, put that on Instagram. Your staple gun will be your next best friend next to a hammer,
Well, I design for Sombrella Fabrics, yes, and I love Sombrella. I can't say enough about Sombrella. But we then entertain with table rounds, draped tables, and my wife has a wardrobe of various Sombrella cloths, because you see, when you're entertained, someone spills red wine or whatever, you just throw it in the wash with a bucket of bleach, and it comes out perfectly new. And so I think the idea of using textiles, because I've always felt that textiles tell a story.
Absolutely.
And whether it be of a certain period or whether it be Japanese, I can remember going to the indigo dye studios in Japan. I was fascinated by how they would tie it and knot it. And you probably are too young to remember, but I can remember that tie dotting and knotting.
No,
and
I was
stuff.
Joe.
Okay.
I was right there
well,
with you.
I didn't think you were a hippie, but
very kind of you, but you don't get a pass on that one.
But I thought that was an art in itself, at the time.
Well, again, and those techniques we don't want to see lost.
No.
I don't want to put a religious spin to it, but it's almost like in religion, there always has to be a storyteller to continue with the narrative.
Right.
And these fabrics do tell a narrative. I mean, an opera without velvet brocade isn't the same. I've seen them. And I don't want to see those ones that are digital.
Right.
I want to see the reflection on the velvet when the soprano's singing, Ave Maria, or whatever. I don't know whether she sings it, but they do tell a story, and that's why everything, the trash or the treasure, are important.
That's right.
Because each one has a story.
Right. And I think for you to salvage and to reinvent these cast of characters, it was so brilliant. And I remember the first time I went into your shop and I said, who is this woman? These are marvelous treasures. And that's what led to your segment on my first HGTV production. Because
flattered.
I think not only you, but your talent, but now it's incumbent to you to teach and encourage the young designers and young eyes.
Absolutely. And coming from their eyes, it's also interesting for me as growth, because I have to look through their eyes too.
Yeah.
And so it becomes, collaboration.
It's so true, because you learn.
Exactly.
You definitely do.
That's if we ever stop learning, then we're done.
I know.
We're done. Goodbye.
That's right. Now, as you know, this podcast is named Inspired. So let's share with all of us what inspires you.
I hate to sound corny, but I'm inspired by Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Every morning I get up, I just redid my garden, which I'd love to show you. And I look outside, and whether it's a cloudy day or overcast or sunny, the first thing I do is look out to my garden, and I'm just happy with seeing that outside of my children. And, I'm inspired by the beauty, really, of everything. I try to find, even, I'm not like, pain and sadness are all part of it, because without great pain and sadness, you can't appreciate beauty.
Absolutely.
So, but I try to look at, that side, and I think we have to get up, especially in the times we're in now, where there's so much negativity on so many levels, that we have to just put ourselves sometimes back in the bubble. It's okay. We don't have to be on top. So to take everything, and that's where finding the trash and turning it into beauty is the same as looking at the beautiful garden or the beautiful flower, or the beautiful face of a woman with 4,000 lines showing how she's lived her life, and getting to know her story, as well as that old brocade that you pick up out of a trash can, or the necklace you find in a thrift store. You wonder whose neck has this been on.
Right.
And, I would just say that you have to be inspired by the things that make you passionate. So I'm not going to dictate to you what they should be, but whatever they are, really love them.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm inspired by my grandchildren. They never, ever disappoint. I don't know, just from the youngest, who's going to be 3 years old, to the oldest, who's 17, it's just a fresh approach. They're without any confines. They just speak their mind, and they're, if I may say it, because I'm a proud grandfather, pretty intelligent, a bunch of kids. But I just love to listen to them, and I think listening is so important too. I don't think we listen enough. And as you say, whether it's, the people at the cleaners that you bring lemons to or whatever, I admire you. I think that you should continue doing what you're doing and spread the goodwill around, and the good design too.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for visiting with us today.
I love you, Joe. I love you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.